The floorboards above my head creaked at exactly 2:17 a.m. Elena was pacing again, her heels clicking against the hardwood like a metronome counting down to something I didn't want to face. I sat in my basement workshop, surrounded by blueprints for Victorian restoration projects, listening to my wife destroy our marriage one footstep at a time. "Jack?" Her voice drifted down the stairs, honey-sweet and poison-laced. "Are you coming to bed?" I didn't answer. Instead, I focused on the antique door handle I'd been restoring, working the brass with fine steel wool until it gleamed. Funny how you can make old things beautiful again, with enough patience and the right tools. Too bad the same couldn't be said for relationships. The creaking stopped. Elena's silhouette appeared at the top of the stairs, backlit by the hallway light. Even from here, I could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she gripped the banister like she was preparing for battle. "We need to talk," she said. Those 4 words. Every married man knows them. They're never followed by good news, never preceded by anything resembling happiness. I set down my tools and looked up at her, this woman I'd loved for 8 years, married for 5. "About what?" I asked, though I already knew. She descended the stairs slowly, each step deliberate. Elena had always been calculated in her movements, precise in her timing. It's what made her such a successful marketing executive, and apparently such an effective liar. About us. About what I need. I laughed, a short bark that echoed off the concrete walls. "Let me guess. You need space. You need to find yourself. You need to live for yourself." Her face flushed, and I knew I'd hit the target. Elena hated being predictable, hated being reduced to cliches. But that's exactly what she'd become. "Don't mock me, Jack." "I'm not mocking you. I'm just wondering when you decided that living for yourself meant living with someone else." The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Elena's mouth opened, then closed. She'd prepared for this conversation, probably rehearsed it in front of her bathroom mirror, but she hadn't expected me to already know. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't." I stood up, brushing sawdust from my jeans. "Tell me, Elena, how long have you been seeing Brent Holloway?" The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. Instead, she straightened her spine and lifted her chin, switching into what I called her boardroom mode. "You're being paranoid." "Am I?" I walked over to my workbench and picked up a small leather boot, one of a pair Elena had bought last winter and claimed she'd lost. "Found this in the back of your closet yesterday? Funny thing about lost boots, they tend to hide important things." Before we deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. I reached inside and pulled out a small flip phone, the kind people buy when they want to keep secrets. Elena's eyes widened, and for the first time in months, I saw genuine fear cross her face. "That's not mine." "Really? Because the last 10 text messages are pretty interesting. Want me to read them out loud?" She lunged forward, trying to grab the phone, but I was ready for her. I stepped back, holding it out of reach. "Please, Jack, let me explain." "Oh, I think the phone explains everything perfectly." I scrolled through the messages, reading select passages. Tuesday, 3:47 p.m. Can't wait to be free of this place. Wednesday, 11:23 a.m. Jack suspects nothing. Thursday, 2:15 p.m. After we're together, we'll make sure he can't touch the business. Each message hit her like a physical blow. Elena sank onto the bottom step, her perfectly styled hair falling across her face. "It's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think. You're planning to leave me, take half of everything I've built, and run off with some lawyer who's been in town for what, 6 months? Brent understands me. He sees my potential." "Your potential for what? Destroying other people's lives?" Elena's head snapped up, and I saw the real her emerge. Not the loving wife, not the successful executive, but the cold, calculating woman who'd been living in my house, eating my food, and planning my destruction. You never supported my dreams, Jack. You were always content to stay small, to work on your little restoration projects, while I had bigger ambitions. Bigger ambitions that apparently include fraud. I scrolled to another message. Friday, 4:32 p.m. Found the trust documents. If we can prove he's unfit, we can contest the inheritance. The inheritance? My Aunt Margaret had left me her estate, not a fortune, but enough to secure our future. Elena had been unusually interested in the legal details lately, asking questions about the trust structure, the conditions for distribution. That's not fraud. That's protecting myself. From what? From being stuck in this fading town with a man who lacks ambition. Her words stung more than I expected. We'd talked about moving, about expanding my business beyond restoration work, but I'd always thought we were building something together. Apparently, Elena had different plans. Well, congratulations. You're about to get everything you wanted. I walked over to my tool cabinet and pulled out a small digital camera, the kind I used to document restoration projects. Elena watched, confused, as I snapped several photos of her sitting on the stairs, looking disheveled and defeated. What are you doing? Insurance. You see, Elena, I've learned a lot about documentation over the years. Every project needs a paper trail. Every decision needs to be recorded. It's amazing what people will believe when you have the right evidence. I pocketed the camera and headed for the stairs. Elena scrambled to her feet, blocking my path. Where are you going? To make some changes. You want to live for yourself? Fine, just not on my dime. And definitely not under my roof. You can't throw me out. This is my house too. Actually, it's not. The deed is in my name, remember? You insisted on keeping your maiden name for professional reasons, so we never got around to adding you to the title. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Elena had been so focused on maintaining her independence, her separate identity, that she'd never secured her legal claim to the one thing that really mattered. Jack, please, we can work this out. No, we can't. You made your choice when you decided to betray me. Now you get to live with the consequences. I pushed past her and climbed the stairs, leaving her alone in the basement with her secrets and her lies. Behind me, I heard her start to cry, but the sound didn't move me the way it once would have. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. The house felt different as I walked through it, like a stage set after the play has ended. Every room held memories of our life together, but they seemed faded now, insubstantial. I went to my office and powered up my computer, then opened a browser window and began searching for locksmith services that offered 24-hour emergency calls. If Elena wanted to live for herself, she could start tonight. But she'd do it somewhere else, with someone else's money, and without the safety net I'd spent years building. My phone buzzed with a text from my old college friend Ben. Still up? Working on that security project for the Morrison house? Found some interesting software that might help with your documentation needs. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Ben was an IT consultant, one of the few people in town who understood both technology and discretion. If I was going to wage war against Elena and her lawyer boyfriend, I'd need allies who knew how to fight smart. Very interested, I typed back. Can you come by tomorrow? I have a project that requires your particular skills. Absolutely. Fair warning. I heard some interesting gossip at Murphy's tonight. Your wife was there with some out-of-town guy, looked pretty cozy. So they weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Elena's arrogance would be her downfall, but I'd make sure the fall was spectacular. I spent the next hour changing passwords on all our shared accounts, transferring funds to accounts Elena couldn't access, and documenting everything with timestamps and screenshots. By the time I finished, the eastern sky was beginning to lighten, and Elena had gone quiet upstairs. Tomorrow would bring the first real battle in what I suspected would be a long war. But tonight, for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not the betrayed husband, not the naive fool who'd trusted too easily, but Jack Mallory, restoration architect and problem solver. Elena wanted to live for herself? Perfect. I was about to teach her exactly what that meant. The locksmith arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, just as Elena's alarm started buzzing upstairs. I met him at the front door, coffee in hand, and watched his practiced efficiency as he changed every lock in the house. By the time Elena stumbled downstairs in her silk pajamas, her key no longer worked. I watched through the kitchen window as she stood on the front porch, confusion slowly giving way to rage. She tried the key 3 times before pounding on the door. "Jack, open this door right now!" I took my time walking to the front hall, savoring my coffee and the sound of her growing desperation. When I finally opened the door, Elena pushed past me, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "What the hell is wrong with you? I couldn't get in my own house." "Correction. You couldn't get into my house. There's a difference." She stared at me like I'd grown a second head. This wasn't the Jack she knew, the one who avoided confrontation and always tried to smooth things over. That version of me had gone extinct sometime around 2:17 a.m. "You can't lock me out." "I just did. But don't worry, I'm not unreasonable. You can come and go as needed to pack your things. Just make sure to call first." Elena's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. She'd expected tears, maybe some begging, possibly even violence. But calm, methodical planning? That was outside her playbook. "This is insane. You're having some kind of breakdown." "Actually, I'm having some kind of breakthrough. Coffee?" I held up the pot, as if we were discussing weekend plans instead of the end of our marriage. "I don't want coffee. I want you to explain what's gotten into you." "What's gotten into me is the realization that my wife is a lying, cheating, scheming parasite who's been planning to destroy my life. Other than that, I'm having a great morning." The casual cruelty of my words hit her harder than shouting would have. Elena sank into one of the kitchen chairs, looking genuinely shaken for the first time since I'd known her. "Jack, I know how this looks, but it looks like you've been having an affair with Brent Holloway while planning to rob me blind, because that's exactly what's happening." I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken of her secret messages. Elena's face went white as she realized the scope of what I'd discovered. "You went through my private things. You hid a burner phone in a boot and left it in our bedroom. That's not private, that's stupid." She tried a different approach, softening her voice and reaching across the table toward me. "Jack, I know I've made mistakes, but we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work through our problems." "Our problems? Elena, you don't have problems. You have character defects. There's no counseling for what you are." The mask slipped completely then, and I saw the real Elena. Cold, calculating, and utterly without remorse. "Fine. If that's how you want to play it, I'll take you for everything you're worth." "With what lawyer? Brent? Good luck with that." "I did some research on your boyfriend last night. Did you know he's been disciplined twice by the State Bar Association? Something about mishandling client funds." Elena's confidence wavered. "That's not true. It's all public record. Amazing what you can find online when you know where to look." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our quiet neighborhood. Mrs. Duffy was already at her post by her front window, binoculars in hand. The old woman missed nothing, and I was counting on that. "You have until Friday to get your personal belongings out of the house. After that, anything left behind becomes mine." "You can't do this." "Watch me." Elena stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I watched her march down the street toward her car, cell phone already pressed to her ear. Probably calling Brent, or maybe her friend Sonia from the office. Either way, the news would spread quickly. That was exactly what I wanted. An hour later, I was sitting at the bar in the Rusty Anchor, nursing a beer and waiting for the lunch crowd to arrive. The Anchor was the kind of place where information flowed more freely than alcohol, and the bartender, Vera, knew more secrets than a priest. "Little early for you, isn't it, Jack?" Vera wiped down glasses with practiced efficiency, her sharp eyes taking in every detail of my appearance. "Special occasion." "Yeah? What are we celebrating?" "My wife's newfound independence." Vera raised an eyebrow. She'd known Elena and me for years, had served us drinks during happier times when we'd come in for Friday night dinners. "That sounds ominous." "Elena decided she wants to live for herself. I'm just helping her achieve that goal." "Uh-huh. And how exactly are you helping?" I took a long sip of beer, letting the silence build. Vera was patient, but her curiosity was legendary. She'd wait me out. "Well, I changed the locks on the house this morning. Seemed like the right thing to do, considering she's been spending so much time at Brent Holloway's place." The glass in Vera's hand stopped moving. "The lawyer? The new guy?" "That's the one. Apparently, Elena finds him more stimulating than her boring old husband." "No kidding." Vera leaned forward, lowering her voice. "I heard he's been flashing a lot of cash around town. Expensive suits, fancy car. Makes you wonder where a small-town lawyer gets that kind of money. Makes you wonder a lot of things." The lunch crowd started filtering in. Construction workers from the Morrison Project, office workers from downtown, retirees looking for cheap food and cheaper gossip. I recognized most of them, had grown up with some of them. In a town this size, reputation mattered more than money. "Jack Mallory, haven't seen you in here during the day in ages." Tom Patterson slapped me on the back and claimed the stool next to mine. Tom ran the local hardware store and knew everyone's business. "Taking a personal day." "Everything okay? You look like someone stole your dog." "Worse, someone stole my wife." Tom's jovial expression sobered. "Ah, hell, Jack. I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be. Turns out she wasn't worth keeping." Words spread through the bar like wildfire. By the time I finished my second beer, half the lunch crowd knew that Elena Mallory had run off with some fancy lawyer, leaving her husband high and dry. The details got more colorful with each retelling, but the core message remained the same. Elena was a cheater, and Jack was the wronged party. My phone buzzed with a text from Ben. "Heard you had an interesting morning. Want some company?" "At the Anchor. Come by when you can." Ben arrived 20 minutes later, sliding onto the stool Tom had vacated. My old college friend looked like he'd stepped out of a tech magazine. Expensive jeans, designer glasses, and the kind of casual confidence that came from making good money solving other people's problems. "So," he said, ordering a beer from Vera, "I take it the confrontation didn't go well." "Depends on your definition of well. Elena's out, the locks are changed, and half the town knows she's been cheating. Fast work." "I'm just getting started." Ben studied my face, reading the determination there. "What do you need?" "Information, background checks, digital forensics, the kind of things someone with your skills might be able to help with." "On Elena?" "On Brent Holloway. I want to know everything about him, his finances, his clients, his history, everything." Ben nodded slowly. "That's not exactly legal, you know." "I'm not asking you to hack anything, just use the same tools you'd use for any background check. Public records, social media, professional databases, all perfectly legal. And if I find something interesting, then we decide what to do with it." Vera refilled our beers, her ears practically twitching with curiosity. "You boys planning something I should know about?" "Just a little research project," I said. "Nothing that would interest anyone." "Uh-huh." She moved down the bar to serve other customers, but I knew she'd be listening. Ben pulled out his phone and started typing. "Give me 24 hours. I'll have everything you need to know about Mr. Holloway." "What about Elena? What about her?" "She's going to fight back, probably already calling lawyers trying to figure out her options." Ben grinned. Let her. You've got something she doesn't. What's that? Home field advantage. This is your town, Jack. These are your people. Elena's always been the outsider, even after all these years. Now that they know what she did, which side do you think they'll choose? He was right. Elena had never really connected with the local community, had always seen herself as above the small-town mentality. She'd made polite conversation at neighborhood barbecues and town events, but she'd never invested in the relationships that mattered. Now that indifference would cost her. My phone rang, Elena's number. I let it go to voicemail, then played the message on speaker so Ben could hear. Jack, we need to talk. I know you're angry, but this is getting out of hand. People are calling me, asking questions. You need to stop whatever you're doing and act like an adult. Ben laughed. She still doesn't get it, does she? Get what? That you're not the same guy she married. That guy would have taken her back by now, would have tried to work things out. This guy? He gestured at me. This guy's dangerous. I liked the sound of that. For too long, I'd been the accommodating husband, the one who avoided conflict and tried to keep everyone happy. But that version of me had been weak, naive, easily manipulated. This version was different. This version fought back. So what's the plan? Ben asked. I finished my beer and stood up, dropping money on the bar. Phase 1 was information gathering. Phase 2 is reputation management. Whose reputation? Both of theirs. By the time I'm done, Elena and Brent will be social pariahs in this town. No one will want to associate with them, do business with them, or even acknowledge their existence. And phase 3? I smiled, and it felt like a predator baring its teeth. Phase 3 is when things get really interesting. Ben's research proved even more valuable than I'd hoped. By Thursday morning, I had a complete dossier on Brent Holloway, and the picture it painted was fascinating. Our small-town lawyer wasn't quite what he seemed. Look at this, Ben said, spreading printouts across my kitchen table. Brent's been in town 6 months, right? But his law practice is hemorrhaging money. Office rent, car payments, those expensive suits, it's all financed. The guy's leveraged to his eyeballs. I studied the financial records Ben had pulled from public databases. So where's he getting the money to maintain his lifestyle? That's the interesting question. His client list is pretty thin, mostly small-time stuff that wouldn't generate this kind of income. But look at this. Ben pointed to a bank statement. Regular deposits, always in cash, always just under the reporting threshold. Money laundering? Or someone's paying him for services that aren't exactly legal. The pieces were starting to come together. Brent wasn't just some opportunistic lawyer who'd stolen my wife. He was running some kind of side business, something that required cash payments and careful record-keeping. What about Elena? Does she know? Hard to say. But look at the timing of these deposits. Ben pulled out another document. They started about 2 months after Elena began her affair. Could be coincidence, but Elena works in marketing for Patterson Industries. She'd have access to client lists, vendor information, maybe even financial data. Ben nodded. Industrial espionage. Sell the right information to the right competitor, and you could make serious money. My phone buzzed with a text from Mrs. Duffy next door. That lawyer fellow just pulled up outside. Thought you should know. I walked to the front window and peered through the curtains. Brent's BMW was parked across the street, and the man himself was sitting behind the wheel, talking on his phone. Even from a distance, I could see the tension in his posture. Looks like our boy is getting nervous. Ben joined me at the window. Think he knows we're investigating him? Elena probably told him about the confrontation. He's trying to figure out his next move. As we watched, Brent ended his call and got out of the car. He was everything Elena found attractive. Tall, well-dressed, confident in that artificial way that came from expensive clothes and borrowed money. He walked up to my front door and rang the bell. I let him wait 30 seconds before answering. Mr. Mallory? His voice was smooth, practiced, the kind of tone lawyers used when they wanted to sound reasonable. "I'm Brent Holloway. I think we need to talk." "Do we? About what?" "About Elena, about the situation you've created." I laughed, genuinely amused. "The situation I've created? That's rich." Brent's composure cracked slightly. "Look, I know you're upset, but throwing Elena out of her own home isn't going to solve anything. It's not her home. It's my home. She's just been living in it. We both know that's not legally accurate. Elena has rights as your spouse." "Had rights, past tense. She forfeited those when she decided to betray me." Brent stepped closer, trying to use his height to intimidate me. "You're making a mistake, Mallory. Elena deserves better than this." "Elena deserves exactly what she's getting, but I'm curious, what's your angle here? Why are you so invested in my wife's welfare?" "Because I care about her." "Right. It has nothing to do with the trust fund she's been telling you about, or the business assets you thought you could get your hands on." Brent's face went pale. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't. Tell me, counselor, how exactly does a small-town lawyer afford a BMW and designer suits on what you must be making around here?" "That's none of your business." "Maybe not, but I bet the IRS would find it interesting." The threat hit home. Brent took a step back, his lawyer mask slipping to reveal something uglier underneath. "You don't want to make an enemy of me, Mallory. Too late for that. You made an enemy of me the moment you started sleeping with my wife." Brent turned and stalked back to his car, but not before I caught the fear in his eyes. He was scared, which meant Ben and I were on the right track. "That went well," Ben said from behind me. "Better than I expected. He's rattled." "So what's next?" I checked the time. "The Founders' Day festival starts in 2 hours. Elena will be there. She never misses a chance to network. And where Elena goes, Brent follows." "Exactly. Time for Phase 2. The Founders' Day festival was one of those small-town traditions that brought everyone together in the park for overpriced food, amateur entertainment, and industrial-strength gossip. Elena had dragged me to it every year, using it as an opportunity to schmooze with potential clients and maintain her social standing. This year, I had different plans. Ben and I arrived separately, blending into the crowd of families and couples enjoying the late afternoon sunshine. I spotted Elena almost immediately. She was standing near the bandstand with Sonia, her friend from work, both of them looking uncomfortable. The reason for their discomfort became clear as I moved closer. Conversations stopped when Elena approached, smiles became forced, and more than one person turned away entirely. Word of her affair had spread faster than I'd anticipated, and the town's judgment was swift and merciless. "Jack!" Mrs. Patterson waved me over to the church booth where she was selling homemade pies. "How are you holding up, dear?" "Better than expected, Mrs. Patterson. Thanks for asking." "That wife of yours?" She shook her head disapprovingly. "I never did trust her. Too fancy for her own good." Other people began gravitating toward me, offering sympathy and support. It was exactly what I'd hoped for, the community closing ranks around one of their own while shutting out the perceived threat. Elena noticed the attention I was getting. I watched her face change as she realized what was happening, how completely she'd miscalculated the social dynamics of the situation. "Jack." She approached cautiously, Sonia trailing behind her like a reluctant bodyguard. "I didn't expect to see you here." "Wouldn't miss it. You know how much I love community events. We need to talk. Privately. I don't think we have anything to discuss. Please, 5 minutes." I made a show of considering her request, aware that half the festival was watching our interaction. "All right, 5 minutes." Elena led me toward a quieter area near the playground, away from the main crowd. Sonia started to follow, but Elena waved her off. "This has gone far enough," Elena said once we were alone. "You're embarrassing yourself." "I'm embarrassing myself. Elena, you're the one who cheated on her husband with some shady lawyer. I'm just the victim here. Brent isn't shady. He's successful, ambitious. He's a criminal. The words hung in the air between us. Elena's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, denial, and finally fear. That's ridiculous. Is it? Tell me, what exactly does Brent do to afford his lifestyle? His law practice barely has any clients, but somehow he's driving a BMW and wearing $1,000 suits. He has other investments. What kind of investments? Elena's hesitation told me everything I needed to know. She suspected something was wrong, but had chosen to ignore it, blinded by Brent's charm and her own ambitions. You don't know, do you? I continued. You have no idea how he makes his money, but you're willing to throw away our marriage for him. Our marriage was over long before I met Brent. No, Elena, our marriage was over the moment you decided you were too good for it. I turned to walk away, but Elena grabbed my arm. Wait, what did you mean about Brent being a criminal? Ask him yourself. I'm sure he'll give you a perfectly reasonable explanation. I rejoined the festival crowd, leaving Elena standing alone by the playground. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. She'd chosen to play games, and now she was isolated in the place where children played. 20 minutes later, Brent arrived. I watched him scan the crowd until he found Elena, then hurry over to her. Their conversation was intense, animated, and drawing attention from nearby festival goers. Trouble in paradise? Ben appeared at my elbow, carrying a funnel cake and grinning. Looks like it. Think she'll figure out what he's really up to? Elena's smart, but she's also desperate. She'll believe whatever he tells her because the alternative means admitting she destroyed her marriage for nothing. We watched as Elena and Brent's argument escalated. Other people were starting to notice, pointing and whispering. In a town this size, a public argument was better than cable television. Should we do something? Ben asked. Like what? I don't know. Intervene somehow? Why would I do that? This is exactly what I wanted. The argument reached its crescendo when Elena slapped Brent across the face, the sound echoing across the park like a gunshot. The entire festival seemed to freeze, hundreds of eyes focused on the drama unfolding near the playground. Brent's reaction was swift and telling. Instead of trying to calm Elena down or apologize, he grabbed her wrist hard enough to make her wince. The gesture revealed his true nature, controlling, aggressive, potentially violent. Several men in the crowd took a step forward, including Tom Patterson and his son Mike. In this town, you didn't lay hands on a woman in anger, regardless of the circumstances. Brent must have sensed the shift in mood because he released Elena's wrist and stepped back, his face flushed with embarrassment and rage. This isn't over, he said, loud enough for half the festival to hear. Yes, it is, Elena replied, her voice carrying clearly in the sudden silence. Brent stormed off, pushing through the crowd toward the parking area. Elena stood alone, rubbing her wrist and looking around at the sea of judgmental faces. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I remembered the burner phone, the secret messages, the plan to steal my inheritance, and the sympathy evaporated. Elena had made her choice. Now she could live with the consequences. The festival continued, but the mood had changed. People clustered in small groups, rehashing what they'd witnessed and speculating about what it meant. Elena tried to salvage the situation, approaching various acquaintances with forced smiles and desperate explanations, but the damage was done. By the time the sun set and the festival began winding down, Elena Mallory had become a social pariah in her own town, and I had become the sympathetic figure, the wronged husband who'd handled an impossible situation with dignity and restraint. Phase 2 was complete. Time to begin Phase 3. The call came at 6 a.m. Friday morning. I was already awake, sitting in my workshop with coffee and the morning paper when my phone rang. Elena's number flashed on the screen, but the voice that greeted me wasn't hers. Mr. Mallory, this is Detective Sarah Walsh with the State Police. I'm calling about a complaint filed by your wife. My coffee suddenly tasted like ash. What kind of complaint? She's alleging harassment, stalking, and threats. Says you've been following her, interfering with her relationships, and making threatening statements. I'd like to ask you a few questions. I set down my cup carefully, my mind racing. Elena was escalating, trying to use the legal system to regain control of the situation. I'm happy to cooperate, Detective, but I think you should know that my wife has been having an affair and planning to defraud me. I have documentation if you're interested. Why don't we meet in person? Can you come down to the station this morning? Of course, give me an hour. I hung up and immediately called Ben. We have a problem. What kind of problem? The legal kind. Elena filed a complaint with the state police. I need you to bring everything we've found on Brent Holloway. On my way. Ben arrived 20 minutes later with a thick folder and a grim expression. This is bad, Jack. If Elena can make the harassment charges stick, you could be looking at a restraining order, maybe even jail time. She won't. I've been careful not to do anything actually illegal. Doesn't matter. In domestic disputes, the woman's word carries a lot of weight, especially if she can make herself look like a victim. We drove to the state police barracks in Ben's car, both of us silent and tense. Detective Walsh turned out to be a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She led us to a small interview room and got straight to business. Mrs. Mallory says you've been harassing her since she asked for a separation, changed the locks on the house, spread rumors about her personal life, confronted her in public places. She's afraid of what you might do next. Detective, my wife has been having an affair with a man named Brent Holloway. She's also been planning to defraud me out of a substantial inheritance. I have proof. I showed her the burner phone messages, the financial documents, and the photos I'd taken. Detective Walsh reviewed everything carefully, her expression growing more skeptical by the minute. These text messages could be interpreted in different ways, she said finally. And changing the locks on your own house isn't illegal, even if it's not very nice. What about the fraud angle? That would be a civil matter, not criminal, unless you can prove she actually stole money or forged documents. Ben leaned forward. Detective, there's something else you should know about Brent Holloway. He opened his folder and spread out the financial records we'd compiled. This man is living well beyond his means, receiving regular cash payments from unknown sources, and has connections to several businesses that are currently under investigation for tax evasion. Detective Walsh studied the documents with renewed interest. Where did you get this information? Public records, mostly. Some social media research. Nothing illegal. She gathered the papers and leaned back in her chair. Mr. Mallory, I'm going to be straight with you. Your wife's complaint doesn't really rise to the level of criminal harassment. You've been aggressive, maybe even cruel, but you haven't broken any laws. Relief flooded through me. So no charges? Not at this time, but I'd advise you to be careful. Don't contact your wife directly, don't follow her around, and don't do anything that could be construed as threatening. Understood. As for Mr. Holloway, she tapped the financial documents. This is interesting information. I'll pass it along to the appropriate departments. We left the police station feeling cautiously optimistic. Elena's legal gambit had failed, and we'd managed to plant seeds of suspicion about Brent in official circles. Think they'll investigate him? Ben asked as we drove back to town. Maybe. But I'm not waiting for the government to solve my problems. What's next? We turn up the heat, make life so uncomfortable for both of them that they have no choice but to leave town. How? I smiled grimly. By giving the people what they want, entertainment. That afternoon, I put the next phase of my plan into motion. I started with a simple Facebook post. Thanks to everyone who's reached out with support during this difficult time. It means more than you know. Small town strong. Family values. The post got dozens of likes and supportive comments within hours. Elena's friends and colleagues could see the social media activity, could see how completely the community had rallied around me while abandoning her. Then I escalated. I created a simple website called truthaboutelena.com and filled it with screenshots of her text messages, photos of her with Brent, and a timeline of her deception. Nothing defamatory, nothing that couldn't be proven, but presented in a way that painted her in the worst possible light. The site went viral within the local community. By evening, it had been shared on dozens of social media accounts and forwarded through email chains across town. Elena called me at 9 p.m., her voice shaking with rage. "Take down that website immediately." "What website?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about. That hit piece you created." "Oh, that. I prefer to think of it as a public service announcement. People have a right to know what kind of person you really are." "It's defamation. I'll sue you." "With what lawyer?" "Brent." "Good luck with that. Everything on the site is true and documented. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation." "Jack, please. This is destroying my reputation, my career. People at work are asking questions." "Good. Maybe they'll figure out what kind of person they've been working with. I'll make you pay for this." "You already tried that with the police. How did that work out for you?" Elena hung up, but I knew she wasn't done. Desperate people did desperate things, and Elena was nothing if not desperate. I was right. Saturday morning brought news that Elena had been fired from her job at Patterson Industries. Apparently, her boss had seen the website and decided that having an employee involved in such a public scandal was bad for business. By Saturday afternoon, she'd been evicted from the hotel where she'd been staying. The manager, a longtime customer of mine, had decided that Elena's presence was disturbing other guests. Sunday brought the final blow. Elena's parents, wealthy socialites from Boston who'd never approved of our marriage, issued a public statement disowning their daughter and cutting off all financial support. In less than a week, I'd systematically destroyed Elena's life. Her job, her home, her family, her social standing, all gone. I should have felt satisfied. Instead, I felt empty. Ben found me Sunday evening sitting in my workshop and staring at a half-finished door handle. "You did it," he said. "Elena's finished in this town. Word is she's planning to leave by the end of the week." "Good. So, why do you look like someone just died?" I set down my tools and looked at my oldest friend. "Because I've become someone I don't recognize. A week ago, I was a guy who restored old buildings and tried to avoid conflict. Now I'm the kind of person who destroys lives for revenge." She had it coming, Jack. "Did she? I mean, yes, she cheated on me. Yes, she planned to steal from me. But did she deserve to lose everything?" Ben sat down on my workbench and studied my face. "You're having second thoughts." "I'm having thoughts, period. For the first time since this started, I'm actually thinking about what I've done instead of just reacting. And I realize that I've become the villain in this story. Elena may have started this war, but I'm the one who's been ruthless enough to win it." "So what are you going to do?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We need to meet. Tonight. Alone. There's something about Brent you need to know. E." I showed the message to Ben, who frowned. "Could be a trap." "Probably is. But I'm curious what she has to say." "Where does she want to meet?" Another text arrived. "The old theater. Midnight. Come alone or I disappear forever." The old Paramount Theater had been closed for renovations for the past 6 months. It was dark, isolated, and the perfect place for either a private conversation or an ambush. "I'm going," I decided. "Like hell you are. This screams setup." Maybe. But Elena sounded genuinely scared when she called about the website. If she's finally ready to tell me the truth about Brent, I want to hear it. "Then I'm coming with you." She said alone. She also cheated on you and tried to steal your inheritance. Her credibility is somewhat lacking. I considered the options. Going alone was risky, but bringing Ben might spook Elena into running. On the other hand, if this was some kind of trap, I'd need backup. All right, but you stay outside unless things go wrong. Define wrong. If I'm not out in 30 minutes, call the police. Ben nodded reluctantly. This is a bad idea, Jack. Probably, but I've been making bad decisions all week. Why stop now? The Paramount Theater at midnight looked like something out of a horror movie. The old marquee was dark, scaffolding covered the front entrance, and shadows seemed to move in the empty windows. I found the stage door unlocked, just as Elena had promised. Inside, the theater was a maze of construction equipment and plastic sheeting. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the walls, and every footstep echoed in the vast space. I found Elena on the stage, sitting in a single chair under a work light. She looked terrible, hair unwashed, clothes wrinkled, eyes red from crying or lack of sleep. You came, she said. You said you had information about Brent. I do. But first, I need you to know that I never meant for things to go this far. Which things? The affair, the fraud, or the part where you tried to have me arrested? Elena winced. All of it. I was angry, confused, feeling trapped. Brent offered me a way out, and I took it without thinking about the consequences. So what changed? I found out what Brent really does for money. She reached into her purse and pulled out a manila envelope. He's been blackmailing people, Jack. Local business owners, politicians, anyone with secrets worth protecting. That's where his cash comes from. I took the envelope and examined its contents. Photos, documents, recorded conversations, all the tools of a professional blackmailer. How did you get this? I broke into his office after our fight at the festival. I was looking for evidence that you were wrong about him, that he really was legitimate. Instead, I found this. The evidence was damning. Brent had been systematically targeting influential people in town, gathering compromising information, and demanding regular payments to keep quiet. Why are you showing me this? Because I realized something when I saw what he really was. I may have made mistakes, but at least I'm not a predator. Brent is. I studied Elena's face, looking for signs of deception. She seemed genuinely shaken, genuinely remorseful. What do you want from me? Help. Brent knows I took these files. He's threatened to hurt me if I don't return them. So return them. I can't. Don't you see? If I give him back the evidence, he'll just continue destroying people's lives. But if I keep it, he'll destroy mine. I understood the dilemma, but I wasn't feeling particularly sympathetic. You should have thought of that before you got involved with him. Jack, please, I know I don't deserve your help, but these people are innocent. They don't deserve to be victimized because of my mistakes. I looked at the evidence again, recognizing several names. Tom Patterson from the hardware store, Mrs. Duffy's son, who worked for the city planning department. Even Detective Walsh's partner was on the list. Brent hadn't just been blackmailing random people, he'd been targeting the very community that had supported me through this crisis. What exactly are you asking me to do? Help me expose him. Use your website, your connections, your credibility. People will believe you in a way they'd never believe me. It was a reasonable request, and it would serve my own interests to remove Brent from the equation entirely. But it would also mean working with Elena, trusting her, possibly even forgiving her. Why should I help you after everything you've done? Because it's the right thing to do, and because, despite everything that's happened between us, I know you're still a good person. The compliment stung because it highlighted how far I'd fallen from that ideal. A good person wouldn't have systematically destroyed someone's life, no matter what they'd done. I'll think about it. Jack, there's something else. Brent knows about your investigation. He's planning to frame you for something. Make it look like you're the one who's been blackmailing people. That got my attention. How? I don't know the details, but he's been collecting information about you, your finances, your activities. He's building a case. The pieces clicked into place. Brent wasn't just Elena's lover. He was a professional criminal who saw our situation as an opportunity. He'd seduced Elena to get access to information about me, then planned to eliminate the threat I represented by framing me for his own crimes. When is this supposed to happen? Soon. Maybe tomorrow. I made my decision. All right, I'll help you expose Brent, but I have conditions. Name them. First, you leave town as soon as this is over. I never want to see you again. Elena nodded, tears starting to flow. Agreed. Second, you sign a confession admitting to the affair and the attempted fraud. I want it in writing, notarized, and filed with my lawyer. Fine. Third, you publicly apologize for what you've done. Full confession, no excuses, no justifications. Jack, those are my terms. Take them or leave them. Elena was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she nodded. All right, I agree. Good. Now let's figure out how to destroy Brent Holloway. Elena and I spent the next 2 hours in that empty theater, planning Brent's downfall with the same methodical precision I'd used to destroy her reputation. It felt strange working together after everything that had happened, like collaborating with an enemy who'd suddenly become an ally of convenience. Brent's planning to plant evidence at your house, Elena explained, spreading Brent's blackmail files across the theater seats. He's got copies of all his victims' files with your fingerprints on them, documents that make it look like you've been running the operation. How did he get my fingerprints? From things I brought him. Coffee cups, tools, papers you'd handled. I didn't know what he was planning at the time. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Elena hadn't just cheated on me. She'd been an active participant in setting me up for criminal charges. When is this supposed to happen? Tomorrow night. He's got someone who owes him a favor in the sheriff's department. They're going to discover the evidence during a routine check. I pulled out my phone and called Ben. Change of plans. Meet me at the theater. Bring your camera equipment and recording gear. What's going on? Elena and I are going to give Brent exactly what he wants. Ben arrived 20 minutes later, took one look at the situation, and started setting up his equipment without questions. Years of friendship had taught him when to trust my judgment, even when it seemed insane. So let me understand this, he said, while positioning cameras around the theater. We're going to let Brent think he's successfully framing you, then turn the tables on him? Exactly. Elena's going to tell him the setup worked, that I've been arrested and the evidence has been planted. Then, when he comes to gloat, we'll have him on camera confessing to everything. What if he doesn't confess? Elena answered. He will. Brent can't resist bragging about how clever he is. It's his weakness. We spent the rest of the night preparing. Ben positioned hidden cameras throughout the theater, set up recording equipment, and created a realistic-looking fake news story about my arrest that Elena could show Brent as proof. As dawn approached, Elena rehearsed her performance one final time. She had to convince Brent that everything had gone according to plan, while secretly recording his confession. Remember, I told her, we need him to admit to the blackmail scheme, the frame job, and anything else he's done. Be specific. Ask for details. What if he suspects something? Then we're all in trouble. But I don't think he will. Brent's arrogance is his blind spot. He'll be so pleased with himself that he won't question your story. Elena nodded, but I could see the fear in her eyes. If this went wrong, she'd be the one facing Brent's wrath. Why are you doing this? She asked suddenly. Helping me, I mean, after everything I've done to you. It was a good question, one I'd been asking myself all night. Because you were right about one thing. Those people don't deserve to be victimized, and because I'm tired of being the villain in this story. You were never the villain, Jack. You were just thorough. Same thing in the end. Elena left at sunrise to contact Brent and set up the meeting. Ben and I spent the morning testing equipment and going over contingency plans. "You sure about this?" Ben asked for the dozenth time. "No, but it's the right thing to do." "Since when do you care about doing the right thing? A week ago you were perfectly happy destroying Elena's life. A week ago I was angry and hurt and not thinking clearly. Now I am. And you think this makes up for what you did to her?" I considered the question. "No, nothing can make up for that, but maybe it's a start." At 2 p.m., Elena called with confirmation. He bought it. He's coming to the theater at 8 tonight to celebrate and pick up the last of the evidence. How did he seem? Excited, arrogant, exactly like you predicted. Good. Remember, we need him to confess to everything on camera. Don't push too hard, but get him talking. I will. Jack? Yeah? Thank you for giving me a chance to do the right thing. I hung up without responding. Elena's gratitude felt hollow after everything that had happened, but I supposed it was better than nothing. The hours crawled by. Ben and I tested the equipment again, checked camera angles, and rehearsed our own roles in the evening's performance. At 7:30, we took our positions, Ben in the lighting booth with a clear view of the stage, me hidden behind the curtains where I could hear everything. Elena arrived first, looking nervous but determined. She'd changed clothes and done her hair, trying to look like someone celebrating a victory rather than someone about to betray her lover. Brent arrived exactly on time, practically bouncing with excitement. He swept Elena into a dramatic embrace, spinning her around like they were in a movie. "We did it," he announced, his voice echoing through the empty theater. "Jack Mallory is finished." "Tell me everything," Elena said, leading him to center stage where the cameras had the best angle. "I want to hear every detail." Brent needed no encouragement. He launched into a detailed account of his scheme, describing how he'd manipulated Elena to get information about me, how he'd planted evidence to frame me for his blackmail operation, and how he'd used his connections in law enforcement to ensure I'd be arrested. "The beauty of it," he said, pacing back and forth, "is that everyone will believe it. Jack's been acting erratic lately, making enemies, destroying reputations. When they find all that blackmail evidence in his house, it'll seem like the natural progression of his breakdown." "What about the real blackmail victims?" Elena asked. "What about them? They'll be so relieved that their tormentor has been caught that they won't ask too many questions. And if they do, well, Jack won't be in any position to defend himself." Ben's cameras captured every word, every gesture, every incriminating detail. Brent was giving us enough evidence to destroy him completely. "You're brilliant," Elena said, and she almost sounded like she meant it. "I am, aren't I?" Brent preened. "Jack thought he was so smart, investigating me, turning the town against you. He had no idea he was playing right into my hands." "What happens now?" "Now we disappear. I've got enough money from the blackmail scheme to keep us comfortable for years. We'll go somewhere warm, somewhere no one knows us, and start over." "What about your law practice?" Brent laughed. "What law practice? That was just a cover, a way to explain my presence in town while I identified targets. I never intended to stay here long term." "So this was all planned from the beginning?" "Of course. I researched small towns, find ones with enough wealthy residents to make blackmail profitable, then set up shop. I've done it a dozen times before." Elena's face went pale. "A dozen times?" "At least. You don't think this was my first rodeo, do you? I'm a professional, sweetheart. This is what I do." The revelation that Elena was just another victim in Brent's long career of manipulation seemed to shake her more than anything else that had happened. She'd thought she was special, chosen, loved. Instead, she was just another mark. "How many other women have there been?" she asked quietly. "What does it matter? You're the one I'm with now." "But there have been others. Women you seduced to get information, then abandoned when you moved on to the next town." Brent's expression hardened. You're asking a lot of questions, Elena. Why the sudden interest in my past? This was the moment I'd been dreading. Elena was pushing too hard, making Brent suspicious. I tensed, ready to intervene if necessary. I'm sorry, Elena said quickly. I'm just excited, maybe a little nervous about leaving everything behind. There's nothing to be nervous about. By tomorrow night, Jack Mallory will be in jail, and we'll be on our way to a new life. Together? Of course together. What kind of question is that? Elena relaxed slightly, but I could see the doubt in her eyes. She was finally understanding what kind of man Brent really was, and the knowledge was devastating. I love you, she said, and it sounded like a question. I love you too, Brent replied, but his tone was casual, automatic. He was already thinking about his next move, his next victim, his next town. Brent? Yeah? I need to know something. When this is all over, when we're wherever we're going, will you still love me? Or will I just be another woman you used and discarded? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Brent studied Elena's face, perhaps seeing her clearly for the first time. Why would you ask me that? Because I gave up everything for you. My marriage, my home, my family, my career. I need to know it was worth it. Brent's smile was cold and predatory. Elena, sweetheart, let me explain something to you. Love is a luxury I can't afford. I go where the money is, I do what needs to be done, and I move on when it's time. If you can't handle that reality, maybe you should have stayed with your boring husband. The cruelty of his words was breathtaking. Elena recoiled as if she'd been slapped, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. So I was just another mark? You were a means to an end. A very attractive, very useful means to an end. That was enough. I stepped out from behind the curtains, my hands raised to show I wasn't armed. I think we've heard enough, I said. Brent spun around, his face cycling through confusion, anger, and fear as he realized he'd been trapped. You son of a... Careful, I warned. Everything you've said tonight has been recorded. Multiple cameras, multiple angles, crystal clear audio. You've just confessed to blackmail, fraud, conspiracy, and about a dozen other felonies. Brent looked around the theater, finally noticing the camera equipment Ben had positioned throughout the space. His shoulders sagged as the reality of his situation sank in. This is entrapment. No, this is justice. Elena came to me with evidence of your crimes, and we decided to give you enough rope to hang yourself. Elena? Brent turned to look at my wife, his expression a mixture of betrayal and rage. You set me up? You were going to frame Jack for your crimes, Elena said through her tears. You were going to destroy an innocent man to cover your tracks. Innocent? Jack destroyed your life. He turned this entire town against you. Because I deserved it. Because I betrayed him and lied to him and tried to steal from him. But that doesn't make what you were planning right. Brent lunged toward Elena, but I stepped between them. Don't even think about it. Get out of my way, Mallory. Or what? You'll add assault to your list of charges? Ben emerged from the lighting booth, carrying a laptop. I've already uploaded copies of the recordings to the cloud and sent them to Detective Walsh. Even if you destroy the equipment here, the evidence is safe. Brent's face went through a series of expressions as he calculated his options. Finally, he seemed to deflate. What do you want? He asked. I want you gone, I said. Out of town, out of the state, out of our lives. Tonight. And if I refuse? Then I release the recordings to every news outlet in New England, along with the evidence Elena took from your office. Your blackmail victims will finally know who's been tormenting them, and law enforcement will have everything they need to prosecute you. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone and showed him the draft email I'd prepared, complete with all the recordings and evidence attached. One button, Brent. That's all it takes. He stared at the phone, then at Elena, then at me. You've thought of everything, haven't you? I had a good teacher. You showed me how to be ruthless. Brent laughed bitterly. So what now? I disappear and you two live happily ever after? No, Elena said quietly. Jack and I are finished. That part of our lives is over. Then why did you help him? Because it was the right thing to do. Because those people you've been blackmailing don't deserve to suffer for my mistakes. Brent shook his head in disgust. You're both fools. You could have had everything. Money, freedom, a fresh start. Instead, you chose morality. Yeah, I said. We did. Brent walked toward the theater exit, then paused at the door. This isn't over, Mallory. Yes, it is. If I ever see you in this town again, if I ever hear that you've contacted Elena or any of your victims, I'll make sure those recordings go public. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison. He left without another word, the theater door slamming behind him with a sound like a gunshot. Elena and I stood in the empty theater, surrounded by the ghosts of our marriage and the wreckage of our lives. The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything we'd lost and everything we could never get back. So, she said finally, what happens now? Now you keep your end of our bargain. You leave town, sign the confession, and disappear from my life. And you? What will you do? I looked around the old theater, thinking about restoration and redemption, about the difference between fixing things that were broken and starting over completely. I'll figure it out. Elena nodded, understanding that our conversation was over. She walked toward the exit, then stopped. Jack? Yeah? I'm sorry, for all of it. I know that doesn't change anything, but I needed to say it. I know. She left, and I was alone in the theater with Ben and the ghosts of my marriage. Outside, I could hear Brent's BMW roaring to life, the sound fading as he fled into the night. Think we'll ever see either of them again? Ben asked. No, they're both too smart to come back here. So what now? I looked around the theater one more time, then headed for the exit. Now we go home, and tomorrow, we start figuring out how to live with what we've done. The night air was cool and clean, washing away the stale atmosphere of the theater. As we walked to Ben's car, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks. Peace. It wasn't happiness, wasn't satisfaction, wasn't even relief. It was just the quiet knowledge that I'd finally done the right thing, even if it had taken me far too long to get there. Elena had wanted to live for herself. In the end, we'd both learned what that really meant.